Well, we're going to get a bit more analysis now from France 24's Douglas Herbert. Doug, this coup in Gabon is now the 8th one in that region in 3 years.
It might even be the 9th. I mean, it's easy to lose count, Jeannie. But, for someone tuning in, if they haven't, gone to sleep with their map of Africa in front of them, they're like, what is going on here? Is this endemic? Is this some sort of coup contagion, a scourge of coups across Africa? I think it's important to sort of pick them apart because, otherwise it becomes this tired old cliche, another African nation with beleaguered bad governance having a coup. We have seen several very recently, right? Burkina Faso, Mali, which were clearly military juntas taking over. Why? It had to do with the fight against insurgencies and mainly sort of this grievance against what they saw as incompetent leadership, not effectively battling the jihadist insurgents. So saying we can do a better job, we're stepping in. Sudan was, also a slightly separate case, right? There's a raging, ongoing civil war, if you will, between two vying leaders there, and that's more of an intra-military conflict, not so much about jihadist insurgency, but about vying clans and factions within the military. So, and Niger, we know once again, sort of hews to that jihadist insurgency, military junta saying we can do this fight better, we have the people's interest at heart. Gabon is a separate case in the sense that we've had, yes, a string of coups. In Gabon, it literally is squarely aimed at what the coup leaders see as the absolute incompetence, the massive fraud, the allegations of corruption against what has become essentially a ruling dynasty, a clan in this country. The country has been independent from France since 1960, right? But it has essentially been led for all but 7 of those years by one family, the Bongo Dynasty, first by the father and since 2009 by the son, who had been, just until yesterday, elected to a 3rd term. And it's against him. It's really against him in this perception that he has made, basically wasted the country's natural resources. The population has not seen any of the benefits of what should be a wealthy and prosperous nation. You could say again, well, that's another cliche, right? The African nation, the resource-rich, the oil-rich African nation where the leaders are all powerful and wealthy and the population sees none of the money. It is a cliche, but it's a cliche made much worse in Gabon's case by the fact there genuinely was an extremely corrupt and, according to most people you'll ask who know Africa far better than I do, a very fraudulent regime that had been sort of failing the people, failing them signally in trying to make the most of what should be a much more prosperous nation, a nation with a lot of things going for it.
We're going to talk a bit more about Gabon's economy in just a minute. But first, Doug, I just want to keep you. France obviously has a very long and complicated relationship with many countries in Africa, the so-called France-Afrique, which dates back almost to the colonial times. But things are particularly complicated in that relationship with Gabon.
It really is. It's easy to say. I guess, look, you can boil this down to the bare essence that technically Gabon remains, quote, a close ally of France. But that comes with so many sort of caveats there, because it's true that for decades and decades, Gabon was for part of that mold, that sort of, that pattern of that France-Afrique mold, where what was it? It was trading political, economic support for business favors, essentially. And yes, and as Charles will tell us, he'll tell us more about the French business presence in the country. But at the same time, since 2009, since the son, Ali Bongo, had acceded to power, had taken over from his father, who ruled for 41 years, it had not been as chummy a relationship. Even if Emmanuel Macron was recently seen here in Paris smiling broadly with a visiting Gabonese president, still maintaining the pretense of a close and chummy relationship, the reality is that the relationship had cooled in recent years, and cooled notably because the French had been starting to go after, investigate the allegations of fraud, of massive corruption within the Gabonese leadership. And that obviously made Gabon a little less keen to cultivate a close relationship with France. It did remain close. France does remain a big and influential presence in Gabon, but it hadn't been as chummy and smiley a relationship, perhaps, as it had been for many, many decades before Ali Bongo had come to power. So when you say it's complicated, it is complicated. But unfortunately, perhaps from the French president's perspective, no matter how much the French presidents, one after another, they come to power, vowing to undo, to unravel that France-Afrique cliche, that decades-long mold, it's stubborn. It persists. It remains more entrenched than many politicians want to admit, and Gabon is a case in point.